Two-vehicle robbery crews creating more angles for innocent people of goodwill to deal with. Hey guys, retired Lieutenant Todd Heaton here with Humilitas First. The obvious solution to dealing with violent crime is to purchase a firearm, obtain good training, and then bulk up on the legal battlefield, which undoubtedly, in big cities across the USA, that battle is going to hold sway. That said, you might want to consider ways to avoid all this violent drama in the first place, because there are no guarantees when it comes to combat. Here's the victim pulling into park. Here we see the first robber suspect vehicle, and here we see the second robber suspect vehicle. The way in which these robber crews roll in and encircle their victim, well, that presents a tactical problem for a single guy, even if he has concealed carry. Because if he turns to face his threat, well, he still has an unknown number of partners in crime behind him. Not a good place to be. This crime is believed to have been a jugging robbery, where the criminals followed the victim from his bank to this location. So I jump on Google Earth to get my bearings. Here we see the location of the robbery. That secondary location where the elderly victim got thrown to the ground and robber number one forcibly took the bank bag out of his hands. I do a little research and I find the location of this gentleman's bank over here. Now that I got my bearings, I can ballpark plot this out on a crimegrade.org violent area map. So we see the secondary crime scene location that he was followed to, and then we see the bank. This robbery just happened July 5th, 2023. So whether this escalation that involves two vehicles is an isolated incident or a new trend, that remains to be seen. Let's talk about some solutions to this particular problem. If you have to live or work inside Houston, Texas, it's my opinion that the number one solution to avoid this type of jugging robbery is for you to accept that it's an investment for you to spend more of your time and a little more money for extra gasoline to do your banking outside of this city in a smaller community that has a far better per 100,000 crime rate as it relates to robberies. Why? People tend towards laziness. Bad guys are certainly no exception to this. Why should they drive 30 to 40 minutes or more to a less populated, smaller community where setting up to monitor a bank, well, that might be more easily spotted? Wouldn't they rather find a bank inside the city, perhaps closer to where they live, just in case a police officer happens to be in the right place at the right time and their robbery turns into a pursuit? Wouldn't they rather be close to a community where they have neighbors and friends who might be very accommodating to harboring a fugitive on the run from the police? Look, if I was the betting man, I'd bet that there's just no shortage of people living and working in large United States cities that bank close to where they work and live. And a lot of those banks are probably well within that high crime dangerous area. So if you're a bad guy, why venture out to unfamiliar areas that is going to carry with them additional risks? Well, anything today could happen, but we want to take a look at probabilities. And I'm going to say it's more probable they're just going to hit the banks that are close to them. When I search Google Earth for Houston, it appears to give me the city limits. Look down just below the city limits and we see Pearland. Let's take a look at that community as just one example among many possible options. Pearland has a population of 125,000 people. Compare that to Houston, Texas, with 2.28 million people. Well, does Pearland even have any banks? Of course they do. There's over 100,000 people living in that community. Well, how far is it from Pearland to Houston, Texas? 21 miles. The time is going to depend, I would think, upon the time of day and the amount of traffic. That's something you got to figure out if you live or you work in Houston, Texas. You can deal with that issue through good planning. Next up, let's take a look at the per 100,000 crime rate, specifically for robberies. One of the best tools that I've found to help you paint a clear picture of the actual crime rate from one community to another is citydata.com. Here, we see from 2007 to 2020, the crime rate for robbery, well, it varies from year to year, but they're down in the low to mid double digits. There were 34 robberies in 2020, giving them a 27 per 100,000 on that scale. Now let's compare that to Houston, Texas. from 2007 to 2020, we see roughly 10 times the number of robberies per 100,000. For example, in 2020, Houston, Texas had 8,757 robberies, or a 373.2 per 100,000. When you start crunching the numbers, look, as far as I'm concerned, it's common sense. If we expand this and we start looking at murders, rapes, and assaults, and all the other crimes, well, if I had to live inside a city like Houston, I'm going to spend the extra time and money to make sure I'm doing all of my business and pleasure out in a smaller community, something similar to Pearland. When the problem is multiple angles that need to be covered, then the common sense solution is you're going to need multiple people who've had both good training and have a willingness to do the work to come up to speed regarding the practical skills associated with safe, fast, and accurate firearms handling, as well as having done the work to come up to speed on the legal battlefield side of things. Look, if money isn't an issue, then just hire an executive protection team. That way you've got the armed, trained professionals to cover all of the angles that need covering. Obviously, most people are not going to be able to afford to do that. And it's highly improbable that you're going to find even one like-minded, well-trained, and educated regarding the legal battlefield, friend to go with you every single time you got to go to the bank in Big City, USA. Situational awareness begins by you having an awareness of what's probable in your neck of the woods based upon reported crimes. That knowledge can then be used to inform your planning as to what you might need in terms of everyday carry or EDC. Now, I've never served in the military, so when I talk about something like logistics, understand I'm talking about that word based on the plain meaning or the definition we might find in the dictionary. Logistics has much to do with planning, handling, and implementation of personnel, materials, and other related factors. Logistics is going to include something like EDC. Typically, my EDC is one concealed firearm and one extra magazine, primarily for the event that I have some kind of magazine failure to feed with the magazine that's inside the gun. With that said, I strive to avoid high crime dangerous areas in as much as is possible. If and when trends in my local area begin escalating to where I believe I'm going to need more material or more personnel, then I'll reevaluate the logistics or the planning, handling, and implementation of protecting my wife, children, and myself.